Once upon a time, there was a gentleman who lived in a lovely house with his charming wife and his beautiful daughter. Until one sad day, the gentleman's wife died. His new wife was neither kind nor pretty, and she had two daughters who were known by everyone in the town as the ugly sisters. The ugly sisters hated their new stepsister. They were cruel to her and made her do all the housework. Her clothes soon became tattered and torn, whilst the ugly sisters were dressed in the best clothes money could buy. At night, the ugly sisters would sleep in the finest warm soft beds, whilst their poor stepsister was forced to huddle by the fire in the kitchen to keep warm, practically sitting in the ashes and cinders. One day, the ugly sisters saw her asleep in the cinders and decided to call their new stepsister Cinderella. The king and queen of the country had a son. One day, they decided to hold a ball for the prince in the hope that he might find a bride. Invitations were sent to every well-to-do household in the land. When an invitation arrived at Cinderella's house, the ugly sisters could hardly contain their delight. They immediately rushed out to buy new dresses and talked of nothing else but the ball. Both ugly sisters spent hours looking at themselves in the mirror. One said, "The prince will fall in love with me for sure." But the other ugly sister pushed her aside and, gazing at herself adoringly, said, "Don't be silly. It's me the prince will fall madly in love with. Imagine, I shall soon be queen." The only time they spoke to Cinderella was when they ordered her to fetch things for them. The day of the ball soon came, and Cinderella spent the day running around, making sure that her stepmother and the two ugly sisters were ready for the ball on time. None of them considered that Cinderella longed to go to the ball. As far as they were concerned, she was nothing more than their servant. By the time the three of them left in their coach, Cinderella was so exhausted she could only kneel down by the kitchen fire and weep. She so much wanted to go to the ball. Suddenly, she realized that she was not alone. She looked up to see a beautiful lady holding a silver wand. The lady spoke. "Cinderella," she said, "I am your fairy godmother. Why are you crying, child?" Cinderella sobbed, "Oh, how I wish I could have gone to the ball." "Then you shall go to the ball," said the fairy godmother. "But first, we have some work to do. Run to the garden and fetch a large pumpkin." Cinderella could not believe her ears, but she did as the fairy godmother said and fetched the biggest pumpkin she could find. With one wave of her wand, the fairy godmother turned it into a gleaming golden coach. "Now for something to pull the coach," said the fairy godmother. "Fetch me some mice from the mouse-trap." Cinderella ran to the larder and found 6 mice running around in a wooden cage. She took them to the fairy godmother, and with a swish of her wand, they became 6 tall, dappled horses. The fairy godmother then turned a rat into a smart coachman, and 2 lizards Cinderella found in the water barrel into 2 splendid footmen. "There, my dear," said the fairy godmother, "your coach is ready. You shall go to the ball after all." Cinderella looked at her torn and ragged clothes and bare feet and said, But how can I go dressed like this? Her godmother touched her with her wand, and suddenly Cinderella was dressed in the most beautiful silver ball gown and the prettiest pair of glass shoes she had ever seen. "Now, Cinderella," said her godmother, "you shall go to the ball, but be sure you are back before the clock strikes midnight." When Cinderella arrived at the ball, the prince was struck by her beauty. No one knew who she was. Not even the ugly sisters recognized her. But everyone thought she was so beautiful, she had to be a princess. The prince danced with Cinderella all night, but she was having so much fun, she didn't realize how quickly time was passing. Suddenly, she heard the clock strike the first stroke of midnight. She let out a cry and then ran away from the prince as fast as she could. As she ran down the steps of the palace, one of her shoes fell off, but she didn't have time to stop and pick it up. The prince ran after her, but she had already gone. He asked the guards if they had seen anyone leave, but they said that they had only seen a raggedly dressed woman running away. As he made his way back into the palace, he found the glass shoe on the steps. He realized that it belonged to the beautiful and mysterious lady he had been dancing with. The next day, the palace issued a proclamation that the prince was to tour the country looking for the lady whose foot fitted the glass shoe. Whoever fitted the shoe, he would marry. The prince travelled for weeks with no success. Eventually, he came to the ugly sister's house. "It'll fit me!" cried the first ugly sister. But when she tried, there was no way it would squeeze on her foot. The second ugly sister snorted with laughter and said, "I'm sure it will fit me. Let me have a try." The prince tried the shoe, but the second ugly sister could barely get her toe in. Then Cinderella stepped forward. "May I try?" she asked. "You?" shrieked her stepsisters. "You weren't at the ball." But Cinderella slipped her foot into the shoe, and it was a perfect fit. The fairy godmother then appeared and touched Cinderella with her wand. She was immediately changed back into the wonderful gown she had worn at the ball. The prince went down on one knee and asked Cinderella to marry him. Cinderella agreed, and there was soon a fine royal wedding for Cinderella and the prince, and they lived happily ever after.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with her mother on the edge of a forest. Her grandma gave her a cloak and hood made of red velvet. The little girl liked it so much that she always wore it, and so became known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother asked her to take a basket of food to her grandma, who wasn't feeling very well. The cottage where Grandma lived was in the middle of the forest. So, Little Red Riding Hood set off. She hadn't walked very far when she met a wicked wolf. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I'm taking this food to my granny," she said. "That's very kind of you. Where does your granny live?" he asked. "Just down this path, near the 3 large oak trees." The wolf smiled a wicked smile. "Why not pick some flowers for her?" he said. Red Riding Hood thought that this was a good idea. The wolf smiled once again and ran off to find Grandma's cottage. When he got there, he knocked at the door. "Come in," called Grandma. The wolf opened the door and in a flash ran over to her bed and gobbled her up with one gulp. He then put on her nightcap and glasses, climbed into bed and waited for Little Red Riding Hood to come. Soon he heard a knock at the door. Come in, he called. Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and went over to the bed. "Oh, Granny," she said, "what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with," said the wolf. "But, Granny, what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with," replied the wolf. "And, Granny, what big teeth you have." "All the better to eat you with," the wolf growled, and scarcely had he said that than he jumped out of bed and swallowed her up with one great gulp. Just then a woodman called to see how Grandma was, but when he saw the wolf lying in Grandma's bed, he took his axe and killed it with one blow. "Grandma, Little Red Riding Hood, where are you?" he called. "We're in here," came a faint voice from inside the wolf. The woodman cut the wolf open, and out popped Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma. "Oh, thank you for saving us from the wicked wolf," said Grandma. With the wicked wolf gone, Little Red Riding Hood and Grandma lived happily ever after.
Deep in the forest there was a clearing. A stream ran through it, and it was here in the evening that all the animals would gather to drink. The tortoise was always the last to arrive, and as he plodded slowly to the stream, all the other animals would laugh and call him names because he was so slow. One evening, as Tortoise ambled towards the stream, the hare, who was the fastest animal in the forest, called to the tortoise. "Come on, Slowcoach." The hare then started boasting. "I'm the fastest here," he said. "I can run faster than any of you." On hearing this, the tortoise walked slowly over to the hare and said, "All right, then. If you think you're so fast, I'll challenge you to a race." The hare fell over with laughter. "You," he said, "you race against me? Ha, ha, ha! I've never heard anything so funny. You'll never beat me in a race." Most of the other animals also thought the idea of Tortoise beating Hare was quite funny, and were chuckling to themselves. The fox said, "Come on, Tortoise, you name the distance and time, and we'll all come along to watch." "Let's start at sunrise," said Tortoise. "We'll run from here to the edge of the forest, and then back again by the edge of the stream. The first one back into this clearing will be the winner." "Agreed," said the hare. The hare thought that this was going to be an easy victory, and ran off into the forest to tell his friends. The tortoise settled down in the long grass for the night. At sunrise, all the animals had turned out to see the race. The hare and the tortoise stood at the start line. The fox said, "Ready? Steady, go!" With this, the hare jumped up and ran off, waving to all his friends on the way. The tortoise started to plod away from the start line. Very soon the hare was out of sight, but the tortoise kept lumbering along. Tortoise didn't wave to anyone as Hare had done. He just kept putting one foot slowly in front of the other as he plodded along. As the hare ran along, he kept stopping to chat to his friends and nibble the sweet grass. Very soon the hare had passed the halfway point and was on his way back to the clearing by following the edge of the stream. The sun was now high in the sky, and eating all that grass had made him feel a little sleepy. The hare thought to himself, "The tortoise will take all day to complete the course. I think I'll just lie down here for a nap." He lay down and very soon fell asleep. The tortoise, on the other hand, had not chatted to any of his friends or eaten any sweet grass. He had kept plodding on and very soon reached the point where Hare was sleeping. Tortoise smiled gently to himself as he ambled quietly past the hare. Later that day, the animals waiting in the clearing saw the tortoise plodding towards them. "Where's the hare?" they called out. But Tortoise didn't waste his breath by calling back to them. He kept walking slowly towards them, and very soon crossed the finishing line. "Hooray! Tortoise has won! Well done, slow coach!" they called out. Only then did Tortoise tell the others that he had passed Hare asleep by the stream. Suddenly there was a rustle in the forest, and Hare burst into the clearing at great speed. He had woken and realized that he had slept much longer than intended. He had raced back to the clearing, but was too late. "You see," said Tortoise, "slow and steady wins the race."
The Three Wishes. One day, a long time ago, a poor woodcutter was working hard chopping wood deep in the forest. Suddenly, the woodcutter looked up to see a pixie sitting on a leaf.
"I've come to give you 3 wishes. Everything you wish for will come true. But remember, you only have 3 wishes, so use them wisely."
Then the pixie disappeared. The woodcutter ran back home to where his wife was making dinner. She laughed when he told her what had happened.
"You must have dreamt it."
However, just in case it was true, they decided to think carefully before they made any wishes. "I'm hungry," said the woodcutter. "Let's eat first, then afterwards we'll think about the 3 wishes."
"I'm afraid it's only cabbage soup. We haven't enough money left for any meat."
"Not soup again," said the woodcutter. "How I wish we had a nice fat sausage to eat." Suddenly a large fat sausage appeared on the table.
"Now look what you've done. That's 1 wish already gone, and you've used it on a sausage."
She continued shouting at the woodcutter until he could stand it no longer. "I wish that sausage was at the end of your nose," he said. And immediately the sausage jumped off the table and attached itself to the end of his wife's nose. The woodcutter laughed at the sight of his wife with a big sausage dangling in front of her face, and this made her all the more angry. However, the woodcutter soon realized there was only 1 wish left, and he stopped laughing. "Let's wish," he said, "for all the money and riches in the world."
"But what good will that do? When I've a big sausage hanging from the end of my nose, I'd be too embarrassed to go anywhere and spend any of the money."
After much thought, the woodcutter and his wife finally agreed that they would have to use the last wish to remove the sausage. The woodcutter made the wish, the sausage disappeared, and then the woodcutter and his wife sat down for their supper. They both agreed how foolish they'd been to use the pixie's wishes so unwisely, and as they ate their cabbage soup, they wished, too late by now, that they'd eaten the sausage in the first place.
Once upon a time there were 3 billy goats called Gruff. They were rather thin goats because the grass they ate was very poor. So one day they decided to set off to look for some new, sweet and fresh grass to eat. Very soon the 3 billy goats Gruff came to a river. On the other side of the river was a meadow full of beautiful sweet grass, the best they had ever seen. There was a wooden bridge over the river, but under it lived an ugly troll. People couldn't cross the bridge because every time the troll heard footsteps, he would pop up and eat the person who was trying to cross. The 3 billy goats Gruff were also afraid of the troll, but the scent of the fresh grass on the other side of the river was so tempting that one day the youngest billy goat Gruff said that he would try to cross the bridge. Trip-trap, went his hooves on the bridge, Out popped the troll. The youngest billy goat Gruff nearly fell into the river with fright.
"Who's trip-trapping over my bridge?"
Roared the troll. "It's only me," squeaked the youngest billy goat Gruff. "I'm very skinny and not worth eating. Wait until the second goat Gruff comes."
"Very well," said the troll. "You may pass."
So the youngest billy goat Gruff skipped happily into the meadow to eat the grass. Then the second billy goat Gruff decided that he would try to cross the bridge. Trip, trap, went his hooves on the wooden bridge. Once more out popped the ugly troll. The second billy goat Gruff froze with fear.
"Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?"
Roared the troll. "It's only me," said the second billy goat Gruff. "I'm really very skinny and not good to eat. Wait for the third billy goat Gruff to come. He's very big and fat."
"Very well," said the troll. "You may pass."
So the second billy goat Gruff crossed the bridge and skipped off into the meadow to eat the grass. Soon after came the eldest billy goat Gruff. He was a very big billy goat with a long beard and large horns. Trip, trap, went his hooves on the bridge. All of a sudden the troll appeared. The third billy goat Gruff was also scared, but he didn't show it.
"Who's that trip-trapping over my bridge?"
Roared the troll. "It's me," bellowed the eldest billy goat Gruff. "I'm the third billy goat Gruff."
"Then I'm coming to eat you,"
roared the troll. "Oh, no, you're not," bellowed the third billy goat Gruff, and he ran straight for the troll. He butted him with his big horns, and the troll fell off the bridge and into the river. The ugly troll fell with a big splash head first into the river and was never seen again. From then on, people crossed the bridge without fear of the troll ever popping out of the water to eat them. The three billy goats Gruff lived happily in the meadow, enjoying the sweet, fresh grass and getting really very fat.
Once upon a time, there was a shoemaker and his wife. The shoemaker worked hard, but he was very poor, and each day he and his wife became poorer and poorer. It was not very long before the shoemaker could only afford one piece of leather to make one pair of shoes. That evening, he cut out the pair of shoes from the leather and left them on his bench to stitch the next morning. The shoemaker and his wife were very sad, for they knew that they would soon be penniless. Early the next morning, the shoemaker went into his workshop to stitch the leather that he had cut. To his surprise, however, there on the bench was a pair of shoes, already made and perfectly stitched. The shoemaker picked them up and ran to show his wife, who said, "Who has made such a perfect pair of shoes?" But neither he nor his wife had any idea who had made them. The very same day, the shoemaker sold the shoes to a lady. She was so overjoyed with their quality that she paid the shoemaker twice the usual price. With this money, the shoemaker was able to buy enough leather for 2 pairs of shoes, which he cut out that night, all ready for him to stitch in the morning. Early the next morning, the shoemaker went into his workshop to stitch the leather that he had cut. But on the bench were 2 pairs of shoes, beautifully made, with not a stitch out of place. The same day, a man came to the shop to try on some shoes. When he saw those 2 perfect pairs of shoes, he was so pleased that he bought them immediately and paid the shoemaker twice the usual price. And so it went on. 4 pairs, 8 pairs, 16 pairs, all perfectly made, whilst the shoemaker and his wife were asleep. The shoemaker soon became famous for his beautiful shoes, and he and his wife grew to be very rich. Yet they still had no idea who had made the shoes for them. So, one evening, after the shoemaker had finished cutting the shoes, he and his wife decided to stay up and see who it was who helped them. They hid themselves in a corner of the workshop behind a long curtain, lit a candle, and then waited quietly to see what would happen. Just as the clock struck 12, the door of the shop opened with a creak, and in came 2 tiny elves. They were dressed in old tatty clothes, and their feet were bare. They were unaware that they were being watched by the shoemaker and his wife. The elves began making the shoes that were cut out. They worked so hard and so quickly that they had soon finished. Then they ran quickly away. The next morning, the shoemaker asked his wife, "How can we thank these little elves for helping us to be so rich and happy?" "Why don't we make some clothes for them?" said his wife. "Their clothes are old, and they haven't any shoes." The shoemaker and his wife both agreed that this was a good idea, and in the evenings that followed, they began to make the elves some new clothes. The shoemaker chose the softest leather that he could find to make some little shoes, whilst his wife made 2 little white shirts, 2 green jackets, and 2 pairs of trousers to match. As a final thought, she also made 2 little caps and knitted 2 pairs of white socks. It was Christmas Eve when the clothes were finished. The shoemaker and his wife laid the clothes out on the workbench and then hid themselves, as they had done before, and waited for the elves to come. As usual, on the stroke of 12, the door opened with a creak, and in ran the little elves, ready to begin their work. But there were no shoes to make, for there were only the beautiful little clothes laid out on the bench. The elves couldn't believe their luck. They chatted and laughed as they quickly changed into their new clothes, and before long they were ready. They joined hands and danced around the room, finally dancing happily out of the door. The shoemaker and his wife never saw the elves again, but they remained rich and happy, and never forgot those little cobblers who brought them such fortune.
Once upon a time there was a little red hen who lived in a farmyard. One day the little red hen found some grains of wheat. She took them to the other animals in the farmyard. "Who will help me to plant these grains of wheat?" said the little red hen. "Not I," said the cow. "Moo." "Not I," said the sow. "Not I," said the sheep. "Baa." "Then I shall plant them myself," said the little red hen. So she did. Every day the little red hen went to the field to watch the wheat growing. Some months later it was fully grown and ready to cut. So she went to the other animals in the farmyard. "Who will help me cut the wheat?" said the little red hen. "Not I," said the cow. "Moo." "Not I," said the sow. "Not I," said the sheep. "Baa." "Then I shall cut it myself," said the little red hen. So she did. The little red hen collected the wheat she had cut, then went to see the other animals in the farmyard. "Who will help me take the wheat to the mill to be ground into flour?" said the little red hen. "Not I," said the cow. "Moo." "Not I," said the sow. "Not I," said the sheep. "Baa." "Then I shall take it myself," said the little red hen. So she did. The little red hen took the wheat to the miller, who very soon turned it into flour. The little red hen then took the bag of flour to the other animals in the farmyard. "Who will help me take this flour to the baker to be made into a loaf of bread?" "Not I," said the cow. "Moo!" "Not I," said the sow. "Not I," said the sheep. "Baa!" "Then I shall take it myself," said the little red hen. So she did. The little red hen took the flour to the baker, who baked it into bread. She then took it to the other animals in the farmyard. "Now I have my loaf of bread, who will help me to eat it?" said the little red hen. "I will," said the cow. "Moo!" "I will," said the sow. "I will," said the sheep. "Baa, baa." "Oh, no, you won't," said the little red hen. "I shall eat it myself." So she did.